Hello and welcome. Today we're going to go way beyond one of the most famous slogans you hear in statistics. We're going to really unpack what causality is and how we can start thinking about it in a much more powerful and frankly more useful way.
Right. It's such a great question. We hear the first part all the time, but that second part, that's the real puzzle. It's the question that sits at the very heart of science, of policy, and especially of economics. So what is this thing we call a cause?
So to answer that, first we've got to really get why a simple link, a correlation, just doesn't cut it. And you'll see the reasons are actually a bit trickier than you might think.
Okay, the core difference here is, well, it's structural. Causation is a one-way street. It's asymmetric. The decision to let Lehman Brothers fail might have caused the credit crunch, but the crunch certainly didn't cause the earlier decision. See, it only goes one way. Correlation, though, that's a two-way street. It's symmetric. If X is correlated with Y, then Y is always correlated with X. Structurally, they're just not the same animal at all.
But that whole asymmetry thing, that's just a warm-up act. The main event, the biggest reason we can't just trust correlation, is something called the third factor problem. Or you might hear it called the problem of confounders. And this is where things get really, really misleading.
Here's a perfect example. Let's say you notice that petrol prices are going up, and so is your electricity bill. They're definitely correlated, moving together. But did one cause the other? Nope. The real cause, that hidden third factor, was a jump in the price of crude oil, which of course affects both petrol production and electricity generation.
So if correlation is out, what's in? Well, one of the first major philosophical swings at creating a rulebook for causation came from the brilliant philosopher David Hume. It was a fantastic attempt, but as we're about to see, the real world is just a little too messy for his recipe.
Hume laid out three conditions. He basically argued that for X to cause Y, we need to see three things. First, X and Y are always found together. Second, the effect, Y, always has to happen after the cause, X. And third, they need to be close, touching or nearly touching, in space and time. No weird action at a distance.
But these rules, they start to break down almost immediately. Let's just take that first one. We all know that smoking causes lung cancer, but it's not a constant conjunction, is it? Not every single smoker gets cancer, and sadly, not every person with lung cancer was a smoker. That idea of a universal one-to-one link is just too high a bar for most real-world causes.
Then there's the second rule, that the cause must come first. That has problems too. Think about a heavy ball sitting on a soft cushion. The ball is causing a hollow in the cushion, right? But they happen at the exact same moment. The cause and the effect are simultaneous. There's no time lag at all.
And finally, get this, even if all three of Hume's conditions are met, you still might not have causation. Imagine a whole theater cast where, one by one, each member gets sick. It looks just like a contagious bug spreading, right? All the conditions seem to be met. But the real cause could be a common factor, like a contaminated meal they all ate before the show. Hume's recipe just can't tell the difference.
So if Hume's rules don't quite work, where do we go from here? Well, we turn to another giant of philosophy and economics, John Stuart Mill. And he came up with a much more flexible, and honestly, a much more powerful idea.
Mill's whole starting point was a simple observation. Most scientific laws, if you take them literally, actually seem to be false. The law of gravity says a marble and a feather should fall at the same speed, but just drop them. They don't. So why not? It's because the law describes what happens in a perfect vacuum, and we don't live in one. There are all these disturbing factors like air resistance that get in the way.
And this insight led Mill to a brilliant concept, the tendency law. A tendency law isn't a statement about what always happens. It's a statement about what a cause tends to do, or what would happen in an ideal world where no other forces are getting in the way.
And Mill himself just put it so perfectly. The mistake people make, he said, is to talk about an actual guaranteed result when they should only be talking about a tendency toward that result. A cause is more like a push in a certain direction, not a guarantee you'll get to the destination. So this is the crucial point. A tendency has three key features. 1, it is a cause. 2, if it were acting all alone in a perfect, isolated environment, it would produce a very specific effect. And 3, and this is the most important part, it keeps on pushing, it keeps contributing to the final outcome, even when other forces are pushing back or in totally different directions. Okay,
This abstract idea becomes incredibly clear when we apply it to the real world. So let's turn to economics and use a classic theory to really see these tendencies in action.
So in economics, there's a really well-known tendency law called the quantity theory of money. It basically says that if you increase the amount of money flowing around an economy, it creates an upward pressure on prices. And notice that word, it's a tendency, a pressure, not some absolute guarantee.
All right, let's play out a scenario. Imagine the government increases the money supply, and according to our tendency law, this creates a 5% upward push on prices. If nothing else was going on, we'd expect to see 5% inflation. Simple enough?
But the world is never that simple, is it? Let's say in that exact same year, there's a huge surge in productivity and innovation. Now, this is a powerful, disturbing factor that's creating a 6% downward pressure on prices, making things cheaper. So now we've got two forces pushing in opposite directions.
So what's the actual result we see in the economy? Well, prices actually fall by 1%. Now, if you only looked at this final number, you might think, well, the quantity theory of money is wrong. The money supply went up, but prices went down. The law failed.
But it didn't fail, not at all. That tendency, that upward push was still very real and very active. Think about it. Without that 5% upward nudge from the money supply, prices would have fallen by the full 6% caused by those productivity gains. So the monetary increase was still doing its job, counteracting the other force. It was making a difference, even though the final outcome was the exact opposite of what it was pushing for.
And this really brings us to the big takeaway. Why is this way of thinking, this mental model of tendencies, so incredibly useful for making sense of our unbelievably complex world? Because thinking in tendencies gives us the tools to see the invisible forces at play. It helps us understand how a cause can be actively shaping an outcome, even when that outcome gets masked or completely overwhelmed by other factors. It explains not just what happened, but also why it didn't happen some other way.
This gives us a whole new lens for looking at the world. It's a powerful way to analyze everything from economic reports to political events. So the next time you see a surprising headline, ask yourself, what are the underlying tendencies, the pushes and the pulls that are creating this result? What hidden forces are at work here?